Good afternoon, everyone. It's Neil McPhee from Sports Labs here. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to talk about ITF and the certification program, a little bit of the administration, but we'll also cover some of the testing and the complexities of the testing and the opportunity for manufacturers, suppliers, facility managers or tennis court owners and how they can utilise that the programme on offer through the international governing body, which is the ITF. Okay, just before we get started, we'll just wait a minute for the late people to join us. But myself, I'm a sports engineer, associate director with Sports Labs. We've also got Joe Meller on the call from Sports Labs, who's a test technician and carries out some of the testing. During the webinar, you can raise your hand and you can ask questions. So please, by all means, if it's timely, ask the questions and we'll try and cover it there and then. If not, we'll come back to the questions at the end. I've got a very good attendance today, so apologies if we can't get around everyone's questions at the end, but we'll try our best. Okay, so just a bit about Sports Labs. We're just going to get started. So Sports Labs are a certification institute. So we test sports surfaces and other technology, and namely sports surfaces, but we do cover balls, we do cover tracking devices, we do cover goal line technology and the offside line. So there's a lot of different things we do, but specifically we are going to look at sports surfacing in the tennis category today. So what is the ITF program? And we'll cover that, but we're also going to look at recognised installers, the manufacturers, the owners, the installation and the surface type. We're going to cover what a recognised product is, what is a classified surface or court pace rating. A lot of people in the tennis world refer to court pace rating. So the question is, what is a court pace rating? And in terms of marketing, what are people looking for, and how do you manage your surface or product to achieve that? A lot of the times in tender specifications, people want a fast court or they want a slow court. So dependent on the user, you can approach the tender with different products. There's also the systems of recognised courts where you can have a 1-star court or a 2-star court. The difference between these is basically community use or elite status. So elite status is more high-ranking events and looking actually at the performance and not just the construction. I'll cover a bit about the research, what's been done at the moment, what's going to come in the future, and I think importantly at the end we'll talk about the opportunity and how this program can really be used and utilised globally, and not just in a location like the UK, but for example it can be used in the Caribbean, it can be used in Australia, it can be used in China. There's many tennis courts around the world. The ITF as an organisation offer a very good program. They have a lot of people involved in testing. They've got a manual, a specification that is very detailed and gives a lot of information on how to do the testing and how to apply and come through the process successfully. We've delivered a lot of the testing in the lab, but we've also delivered court testing around the world, from China to USA to the UK to Turkmenistan to many different countries. So it's a system, a global system by a global governing body that can be utilised around the globe. The value of this programme is that it gives a consistent approach to certification and products, and in that respect it allows people to have a level playing field and understand if the court has been installed to the high level or if the product they're buying has been rated with a known and regulated system. So the ITF, like other global governing bodies, have an obligation to produce these quality programs, and the ITS program is very well managed by technical and able staff, which is great. Okay, so what we're going to look at is a little bit about what's out there to use and how you use it. And I suppose that the first thing is there's a website. The website gives all the technical information you need. There's a lot of reading information. You can always come direct to us and ask us a question to save time. But you can register as a manufacturer or an owner of a product or a facility. So there's that process to go through with the ITF, and they're very good at helping you through that process. The technical documentation I've covered a little bit already, but they do have the specification that that's there for people to read in terms of how you test, what's the complexities of testing, and what they're looking for in terms of tolerances. Their research and development team or their technical staff produce a lot of this documents on hand to help you with it, and likewise so are our team. So we've also got a research and development team that don't just look at certification, but they look at evolution of testing equipment and evolution of standards. So we've got that side to the company as well that can always be utilised. In terms of a company, our global locations are really important to providing local services. So some of our satellite branches in Turkey or the Netherlands or the Nordic countries or down in South Africa or in Americas, these locations allow the testing to be carried out on site at a lower rate in terms of price, but also a higher reactivity. So to deliver a program like this needs people around the world, and the ITF are very open to that, and they have laboratories around the world. One of the ways they control these laboratories is they have a system for a striking system where if you get 3 strikes, you essentially are suspended. So there is a good system for monitoring labs in terms of doing the things properly and correctly. So a little bit about the process and how do you attain a classification or an ITF recognised court? Well, it all starts with getting the communication and registration done with the ITF and engaging with a laboratory like ourselves to take you through the process. So commercial laboratories like ourselves will do the testing and provide the test results, and then upload those test results to the ITF, and then the ITF will then take the administration side of it with you as a registry and take you through that process. There'll be a fee for that, but there's also a verification process where the ITF will verify what the lab's doing. So that samples have to go to the ITF, but they also have to go to us or the laboratory doing the test. The products are classified for 3 years, and you can use the ITF logo for marketing purposes through that period. But there's a recertification that you can do on that product after 3 years. It's quite a simple and an easy process to go through. There is a difference in the evolution of test equipment, which sometimes means there's a slight delay in trying to correlate the data, but it's generally a process that can be done pretty quickly. And I suppose the system for courts is very similar in terms of recognition of a court 1-star or 2-star. You select the laboratory, there's an administration fee to the ITF payable, and then after that you pay obviously the laboratory for coming out to do the test. Now the ITF program is not just designed for the tennis court owners or the manufacturers. It can be designed for any person with a invested interest in the court or the product. So you can essentially get a secondary certification, and that's something the ITF offer. And that can, as I say, can be from the court owner to the installer to the manufacturer. And the purpose is really to show that they can produce high quality materials and demonstrate the courts can be installed to a high level, not just for safety of the end user, but performance is covered as well. Okay. I suppose one of the opportunities or one of the good things to point out in this presentation is that there is a recognition system for people that do more than a certain number of courts. Now, at the moment, the program is not delivered I suppose, in high volume globally, but there is companies that have a recognition for having so many courts. The California Sports Surfaces is the one registered on the website, so they've essentially done more than 50 installations of courts. Sometimes there's multiple courts on a single venue, so there might be up to 20 courts at one venue, but that's something that's there for people that commit to the program and want to show a level of installation quality. So that's there for people to use, and it's important that people are aware of that, because if you're sitting at 7 or 8 courts, it's a good thing to get up to 10. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to cover is, I suppose, the system that we use, the portal that we use, and I suppose this is more so in the laboratory, where the laboratory products are uploaded. But for example, I think we've got about over 50 registered products or 50 items on our portal for lab testing, and the ITF use this system to communicate with the labs and share the results and correlate the results, and then effectively certify the products. And then it's easy to do the renewal at a later date, so that all the original system is picked up. It's essentially a product passport, which is great. There is obviously the correlation that the ITF do, so not all the time is the turnaround within the laboratory's hands. You have to be aware that once we do our bit and upload the results, there's then the ITF that have to do their bit. So don't always commit to a specific date for receiving the certificate or the CPR. There is complexities in the kit, and there's obviously a lot more that goes on than just firing a ball off the surface. So that's something that you need to consider when trying to get the certification. This is an example picture of the portal. I've actually blanked out the products that are on our system here. The reason for that is for client confidentiality. Unfortunately, we can't share that information, but you can see an example of the system. And currently, due to COVID-19, there's obviously restrictions with ITF staff and sample deliveries, so that's important to note at this current time. Okay, so one of the things that is covered in the ITF program, which I find very helpful, and I think a lot of people will, is the surface type. And a lot of the times people talk about what type of surface they want, but there is a drop-down menu in the portal and the registration of any products with the ITF. So these are covered more detail on the website, but you can see a breakdown here in what the type of material is and what it's categorized as. There's obviously the artificial clay we see quite a lot of now in requests, quite new. The high performance venues, the acrylic surfaces are obviously quite highly tested, you know, coming through the laboratory. And there's obviously new systems as well, innovation that doesn't want to be stifled. So there is the challenge of what do you categorize unusual systems, and there's an other drop down in the menu for that. So so that's the thing, and you can also test natural quartz, but you can't obviously test natural in the lab. It's very difficult to replicate a natural turf system in the lab. So you can do that on site, for example, at Wimbledon, but not actually in a lab environment. Okay, so I'm just going to run through the construction types. This was more for an internal webinar we did for training, but what you can see here is you've got the construction layers and levels, and it gives an understanding of what's expected in design or example good practice. And these run through from artificial grass and artificial clay, with the type of sub-base material, the grade, the compaction, right the way through to carpet systems or to matting systems. So again, how does the construction change below? The wearing courses and the susceptibility of frost in the system is very important. We obviously have a lot of climatic conditions that differ depending on where you are in the globe. So that's critical that you design your sub-base for the location and the layers that are common in design. A lot of the design construction comes from the automotive or highways, and that's something to consider. You can always look back at that. Some particular products need different slopes on the court than others due to infiltration and percolation of water. So that's something to consider. Yeah, and some of them will go into the levels of agronomy, like natural grass. What type of material, soils, and layers do you need below to maintain the durability, but also spread the load. And acrylic as well. I suppose it's quite common to see this in high-ranking events, but there's many different types of layers and cushioning systems. A lot of the player perception these days is around protecting the athlete's joints and from injury long term. So you're starting to see a lot more shock absorbing layers to prevent injury. And I suppose in the UK, if we talk selfishly about the UK, then we see a lot of asphalt courts. You particularly see this in, I suppose, residential, people's housing, access for children, play areas, that kind of stuff. So the construction of asphalts, how many courses of asphalt do you need, a wearing course, textured surface, how do you get to the final finishes, what kind of PU paint or what do you use to finish the surface, improving the slip resistance properties. Okay, so I'm going to move on to classified products and what we look at in terms of classification. So if someone wants to register a product, how do they do it? So the simple process is we test it, we send the samples to the ITF, or you can send the samples to ITF, we upload our results, the ITF do their testing to verify the results, and in this process the manufacturer has to pay the ITF license fee. Now, as mentioned, and I've covered this already at the start, is that there's a reliance on the ITF to verify the test results for any laboratory, so that's something that in terms of commitment to turnaround is difficult. We can commit to when we upload the results, but there's also the part of the process where you as a registered licensee has to do the administration and follow that part through with the licensee fee. Now, this is an example of where you would see the products on the website. So I've taken a screenshot, you can see here, and it gives a lot of detail, you know, to the manufacturer name, their address, the contact details, more importantly, the expiry date of the product and when you need to resurface that, recertify that. And furthermore, you can also see here in the drop-down menu, you can categorize in terms of pace. A lot of tennis players know exactly what surface they want, and you can go from category 1 to category 5, slow to fast. There is overlap. Some people have a medium fast and a medium slow, and some people are disappointed when they learn that their surface is actually medium slow and not medium. As I say, people are very particular about what they want, so just be aware that, you know, you can play with the mix, the product, to try and get what you want, but there may be a bit of research and development in the process to do that. And again, I mentioned about categorizing the surface type, so you can look at the category of the surface and you can find out who produces what type of surface at what pace. Okay. Now, I want to jump onto CPR and what CPR is and how it's regarded in the market. It's very important to do a CPR test or a court pace rating. It's abbreviated for court pace rating. You have to do 27 shots on a court, on a product, and what you need to do is consider the coefficient of restitution, the coefficient of friction, the input and output velocity and speeds, and then you come to your result through your calculations. The focal point is really on performance, so the speed of the court and how that court will play for the end user. So an example output here is the velocities. Your 4 top V's in the column is your input and output speeds, horizontal and vertical. And there's tolerances for them when we do testing, so we have to stick within those tolerances. And then that effectively gives us the coefficient of restitution, the coefficient of friction, which we can calculate the court pace rating from. There's a lot of variables in the testing. It's a very close proximity test, so it's important that these are controlled. Simple things like the balls that we use are pressurized and regulated balls from the ITF, and the equipment we use, the CESTI or the Sprite, the new version, which is called the Sprite, has 4 light gates, and these light gates arrays effectively pick up the inbound and outbound speed and angles. So that's how we come to measuring the court pace rating, and when the ball hits the surface and comes off at a different angle, then it obviously has an effect on the CPR in terms of the speed it comes off the surface as well. And the test report that you would receive it goes into each shot and the coefficient of restitution and friction in each shot, but more importantly, it gives an average across the range, and you can see that we're looking for high consistency. So sometimes, not always, the shots will fall within the tolerances and be applicable, so we might have to redo some of the shots. But what you can see at the bottom is it gives the CPR, essentially what you need to produce your product within a category. And the bands are there. You can see the logos and codes that are given for each band. And as I say, that's classified for 3 years. You can recertify after 3 years. You can also try and to manipulate your surface, change your surface in terms of inflow rates, in terms of surface texture, in terms of thickness, to try and look at hitting another category. And this is a quick example of the equipment, and you can see the ball comes out the cannon, it hits the surface, and there's two arrays before it hits the surface and two arrays after it hits the surface. So these are things that we look at during the test and how the test is operated. This is quite a good diagram. It's presentable. You can find it on the ITF website or Google, and what it shows is how the CPR changes in relation to friction restitution and where those arrays are. It's colour branded, which really helps. Okay, so we're going to move on to recognised courts now, and what we do for recognised courts. So recognised courts, you can test them to 1 or 2 star. They're slightly different. They're very accessible, more so than other global governing bodies. So that there's a high opportunity for volume here, and in terms of carrying out not just on one facility but others. And you can see the logos that are given as well in terms of the pace of the court. I've popped up an example of the courts that are tested. You can see that some facilities have up to 18 courts, and that's where people will go in and test one court but test the other courts in the same visit. It's financially viable, and the registration process and registration fee is slightly less, or it's a lot less for your second or third subsequent courts. When we talk about ITF 1 star, we talk about the tests we do in terms of evenness, slope and planarity, dimensions and visual. Obviously, planarity is quite an important test in tennis, where it's not so much in other sports. So there's got to be some level of assessment of the planarity of the court, and not just the slope in different points. We tend to do tests on a grid, and then evaluate that after we've taken the results. But we also check the evenness, so that's more of a safety-driven test for the user. Is there uneven surfaces that's going to, or close proximity uneven surfaces that's going to be an obvious safety hazard for the player? The ball can obviously bounce differently off an uneven surface as well. And surprisingly or not, one of the biggest problems is dimensions. So we do tests on dimensions, and the tests on the dimensions are very tight for obvious reasons. It's a small court, it's got to be fair to both users at each side of the court, so dimensions are critical. And finally, there's a visual assessment on the court. So we check the visual aspect. Is there any inconsistencies in the surface texture, colour, anything that would be an obvious concern to the end user or to the ITF? And you can see here the level of detail we go to with the dimensions. So there is a lot of testing we do in terms of dimensions, and it's quite easy for courts to be found out of tolerance with dimensions, and it's not something that's quite easy to fix. One of the best examples we've got is the tufting layout on an artificial carpet was wrong, and told the court had the wrong dimensions. Now, nobody thought it was wrong because it was tufted, but simply someone had put the wrong dimensions into a CAD drawing, and they produced the court in the factory, and then on the facility it was the wrong dimensions. Okay, so what's the difference between ITF 1 star and ITF 2 star? Very simply, ITF 2 star has court pace rating. So we do the same test as we did in the laboratory for certifying products, but we do that on the court. We do that in 4 different locations on the court in different directions, and that complements the original 1 star test. So we continue to evenness, slope and planarity, dimensions and visual, but we do the court pace rating as well. You can also certify a product on a court if you haven't got the product certified in the laboratory. So there's certain stipulations with that, but it does allow you to certify a product if you haven't gone through the laboratory process. In terms of the cost to do it, a primary court for 1 star is $500 US. Courts after that is I think a lot lower, so you're probably looking at $100 or $200 US for a second court. So it drops down if you want to have multiple courts in one venue. I suppose an applicant there is an opportunity for an applicant of a secondary applicant, so it might not just be the product owner or the facility owner, it could be the manufacturer. So the manufacturer might want to promote their product and being certified in that location, and there's a $2,000 opportunity for that as well. So there is opportunities for other stakeholders to benefit from the installation. And you can see here as well, we've labelled the costs for product certification, and they're slightly higher, but they're fair in terms of against other global governing bodies. It's achievable. Some other governing bodies charge a lot more, probably 5 times, or sometimes, up to 15 times what the ITF are charging. So it does allow people to certify their products in a realistic cost fashion. Okay, so research. So what are we doing, and why are we doing that? Well, there's a lot more testing that's done in terms of just the court pace rate and 1-star and 2-star. We've got slip resistance durability testing, Lisport testing, so accelerated wear, and there's a lot of stuff that our R&D department are working on as well that the other governing bodies are not. Okay. And I suppose one thing that I wanted to raise today was the opportunity to look at player perception and court perception and what people think. Now, we've never done this with tennis before, but we're very interested to buddy up with member associations or governing bodies to address court classification or court perception by the user. We've got experience doing this with other governing bodies, and it's quite easy to roll it out to tennis. So how do we merge what we're testing with what the player feels and what the player wants in the court? So there's an opportunity, and we would like anyone that's interested to reach out to us to be involved in that process. And then also you can have a dashboard that looks at the results, looks at the detail of the questions you ask. You can change the questions, and you can compare these to different facilities in terms of rating the facilities. Okay, so common hurdles with CPR or common hurdles with ITF testing. Planarity tends to be a problem, so having a consistent level. It seems to be a challenge, particularly in certain locations around the world. People still do things by hand. By hand can sometimes lead to mistakes, and likewise, sometimes machines in close proximity, joints, where machines are operating in tight spaces up to curbing, there can be mistakes in these areas, and it's difficult to taper into curbs. Dimensions, I mentioned the example with tufting in a factory and it being wrong by an AutoCAD technician. And similarly as well, the ITF verification can sometimes bring up problems of correlations between the testing results in a lab and the testing results of the ITF, and that's sometimes down to the equipment used, sometimes the person. It could be numerous things. The consistency of the material provided by the registry. So we might get a sample in our laboratory, but it might be different in the ITF, and the application rate of material or the installation or testing protocol should be the same, but sometimes it can differ. And I suppose in terms of the opportunity, I think it's good to finish on the opportunity. The ITF program is a great program there to be used. It's there for everyone to use, not just labs, but for facility managers, for tennis court owners, for national governing bodies. It's there. It's designed to be robust. It's designed to give people feedback and confidence that products and courts are installed or manufactured in a very high quality way. And I suppose there's an opportunity for a database as well to monitor the number of courts and the quality of the courts. There's a system, and people should really buy into the system that the ITF have produced. It allows us to create relationships with global governing bodies and also national governing bodies in terms of sharing knowledge, sharing good practice, sharing avoidable mistakes. I think as well, just to close, is that ITF 1-star and ITF 2-star are two different tests. ITF 1-star is very accessible. It's quite easy. It's not the most costly exercise. So don't always think about wanting court pace rating. Think about who the user is and is it safety or performance that you want. And again, it's open to everyone, not just the manufacturer or the court owner. There's everyone as stakeholder can get involved in the process. Okay, so that's a quick cover shot of the ITF program. Very interested to hear how people use it around the world, so we'll communicate with people after the presentation, but also to cover questions now is good. So I've got a couple of questions asked in the portal here that I'll just cover, and they've been asked during the presentation. So the first one is here is how long does a test take? In the laboratory, the test can take half a day to a day, depends on the setup, but it doesn't take too long. The biggest thing with the laboratory testing, so product classification, is knowing the setup, is knowing the makeup and how we in a laboratory make sure the sample's ready to test. So you might give us a sample and the material, but how do we ensure that that's set up the way you want it set up? The next question we have is how many courts pass? Well, just going back to the first question, actually, I didn't cover tennis courts. So CPR on tennis courts that have been installed in one-star testing. This can take probably 3 to 4 hours on one court, and it depends where you are in the world. We'll obviously have to get to that location. So it's not a long process. It can be done pretty quickly. You can be present and you can see how the testing's done for your own knowledge as well. Okay, next question that I was just about to cover was how many courts pass? So the pass rate is quite high in terms of installations, but there is common problems, and the reason our rate is quite high for passing is because we try to share information before we go to do the test. So we try to encourage a contractor or facility owner to do obvious checks that might lead to a failure. So if we can give that information before going, then the contractor or owner of the facility can ensure that the facility is ready for the test. Okay. Next question is performance versus safety. Okay, so I think what they're asking here is there a big lead towards safety over performance testing? I think what's very obvious and very clean in the ITF program is that you have safety and construction regulations in ITF 1-star, and you have very clearly performance with CPR. I think with other global governing bodies, it's not as easy to differentiate between community and elite usage. So that's something that's very direct and clear with the ITF program. Okay, the next question I have here is in terms of product type, so acrylics or clays, is there a higher percentage pass rate? No, essentially it comes back to the quality of the installation on the court, and with CPR product testing in the lab, it's not a pass or fail, it's a category. So, okay, you have to have consistency, but it's a categorization test, so you can have a fast or a slow court. When it comes back to site testing around the world and on live installations, then it comes back to the quality installation of the contractor. I suppose there has to be a consistency between CPR, between the product in the lab, and what's on the court, but we generally don't find that as a problem and see very many failures. Okay, any more questions from anyone? Okay. Okay, there's one just popped in. How many asphalt courts do you test in the UK? Asphalt courts are not generally tested, unfortunately, although they're the most common. The program, the ITF program, isn't utilised as much as it should be, in my opinion. And I'll speak pretty vocally about that. I want to see it used more around the world. It's a good, robust program. It's there for national government bodies to use. In terms of the question, asphalts are not generally regulated, and it's something that local governing bodies can do more than the ITF. So I suppose the important point here is that people in countries, localized countries, need to push the program. The ITF can't go to every country and push the program. They can provide the program, but they can't push it and market it. So that's the opportunity that I alluded to in one of my slides. Okay, next question. Have we got any more questions? Okay. Okay, we've just got one in here. It says, you mentioned about manipulating a surface. How do you change the CPR? Okay, it depends on the product type, but essentially you've got to think about the test. And the CPR test, looks at the ball coming in at an angle at a speed, and that inbound angle has a horizontal velocity and a vertical velocity, and the outbound angle has a horizontal velocity and a vertical velocity. So what we need to understand is what happens to the ball on impact, and how does that change its outbound angle and speed? Does the ball slip on impact? Sometimes the distance of interaction of the ball can be higher on one type of surface to another. So the answer to the question is you have to think about the top surface, the texture, the cushioning of the surface, and you can change depending on the type of material, whether it's a texturized material, hard like an acrylic surface. You can think about the amount of sand, the grade of sand in the paint. If you look at an artificial turf particulate infill or artificial clay, the size of the particles, the amount of material within the fibers. There's many different ways you can manipulate it. The best advice is that when you come to the laboratory to do the test, have an idea of what category you want and have that discussion with the laboratory. So, I mean, we're quite confident in our ability to give you accurate information on how you can change that surface if you want to go for another category. So just be very open and very direct with the lab is probably the best advice I could give. Okay, I think we've got one more question here, so we'll cover that and then we'll split for the day. So the final question is regarding the court rating or performance. So I guess this is coming back to the app and the portal that I was discussing in terms of people rating courts for hardness, for performance as they see it, and this can be related to injuries or can be related to consistency. It can be related to anything. So the question really is, how do you push that out, and can it be used by everyone? Okay, so the answer to that question is no. At the moment, we haven't pushed out any app for tennis courts, but we can do it within a couple of days. We want to do it. We're looking for the right partners to do it. We like to do it as research to find out what people think versus the testing results. So anybody that's interested in trying to take the app and use it and understand tennis court surfaces by the user is very welcome to get in contact with us and use it. Sometimes these projects can attain financial research grants. Sometimes it can be funded by ourselves labs if there's a reason to do it. So please get in touch if you're interested. Okay, any more questions? Okay. Just got a couple of comments coming in saying thank you for the presentation. Not at all. It's very, very light what I've talked about today. We can go into a lot more detail, but we can do that at a later date, or if anyone's interested, please reach out. Okay, thank you everyone for attending, and I hope everyone's safe during the COVID lockdown. Obviously challenging times, but very much looking forward to seeing everyone again and getting back out and playing sport particularly. Okay, thank you. Cheers guys, have a nice weekend.